Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday, the Leading Change episode, this week with Ravi Jay. Hi Ravi, welcome back.
Hi Vasco, thank you. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Ravi, on Wednesdays we focus on the role of the Scrum Master as a change agent. And we do that because we understand that a lot of our work is really working with change, whether it's personal, individual, team-wise, or even organization-wise change. We do have to sharpen our change leadership skills. So let's dive into one of those stories. Tell us a story of a change process you were involved with, Ravi, and then walk us through, the tools, the tips, the tricks, the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Gladly. I'll get right to it. It is through this work experience or story that I began to understand that inclusivity is key to change, make adoption and transformation stick. Now, this story, Vasco, happened about 6 years ago, and I was working with a C-level exec with aspirations of driving value out of agile transformation in their part of the organization. We landed with good wind behind our sails with C-suite buy-in, as this was the first such transformation they were trying out. Buoyed by the buy-in, we got stuck into assessing state of the nation for our target group. Our assessments showed that to achieve optimal flow, we need to look at the cross-organizational silos and effect change and agility in other parts. Since this was not part of the remit and our funding source, we were at that point in time satisfied in putting a pin on that topic. I'll come back to that pin a little later, Vasco. Now, as with any change program, the Scrum Masters were coaching their teams, and we went out of our way to create a buzz around the transformation program. We had really good communications plan. We conducted learning sharing sessions, joint sprint reviews as a group. We celebrated success. We branded the learning activities in physical boards around the workplace to motivate people to adopt to the ways of working and participate more in the change and the transformation. All Scrum Masters, including myself, found it relatively easy to raise the morale of our teams since there was good buy-in from leadership and management, and they were incentivized to adopt good behaviors, ideal engineering practice, and a lean mindset. Now, we observed that as time went on, we were getting really good at optimizing our part of the board, and that went really well. But in terms of broader organizational outcomes, there was no change. We had become really good at doing the wrong things in the right way. Here's why. Little did we know that there was an entire universe of people who were getting disenfranchised by our activities targeted at people in a certain part of the organization only.
So what do you mean by that, by the way? What do you mean by people who felt disenfranchised?
Now, like I said, we were brought in by an exec to effect change in their part of the organization. And with all of our agile branding, we were leaving people outside that organization behind. It became clear to us that the tools and techniques we used in our organizational silo, we were creating local excellence, but essentially collective failure. Now, this failure became worse, Vasco, when the sponsoring exec, right, in the area that we came into. When the sponsoring exec thought it was a good way to grow their organization sideways, to bring more functions into transformation scope. This became worse because it was viewed as a land grab. Now, we had a really good program with good intentions, beginning to go a bit pear-shaped for two reasons. One, we were leaving the rest of the people behind, and our actions were viewed as a bit of a land grab. So this is where the lowest point of our change program. Now, we could have done the easier bit and landed more consultants, land and expand, right? Gone into the broader area and engaged in transformational activities. While being a great revenue opportunity under the land and expand ideology, this was wrong for that organization. So we agreed to develop change agents and advocates within the transforming organization who would then get deployed to other parts of the organization. Now, for them, this was viewed as a breath of fresh air, as the people were trustful of their own people, so to say. And I learned by observing that transformation coming from within is more powerful than a preachy consultant. Suddenly, the flow issue that we had put a pin on earlier that year was ready to be addressed. Right? The organization started seeing benefits relative to time to market, and this translated to better products for their customers. Through this experience and this story, Vasco, I began to really understand that inclusivity is key to make adoption, change, and transformation stick. E.g., leave no one behind. And Vasco, realizing that for me, it took a bad experience to realize, but realizing that felt great.
One of the things that from that story that I would like to highlight is this, that we'll dive into that, but the phrase is everybody needs to be an actor in their own change, right? And one of the things that I've seen, and I have been guilty of that myself, is that very often we look at this as we are the actors, they are the people who change. And the tip that you share, like growing internal change agents and then having them work with the organizations where maybe they even already worked before, where they have a good network, where they have trust, where they know people in a personal way that externals could never know, I think is a great and very practical tip on how to bring this change, keeping that in mind, right? So keeping in mind that people need to be the actors of their own change.
Could not have said it better, Vasco. That's a great representation of what actually happened.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to explore that a little bit because it is not that easy to actually go and grow internal change agents. Of course, the first step and perhaps even the most difficult one is to find people who want to do that, right? Who want to be the actors, the drivers of that change. But how did you guys do it in that story? Like, how did you identify, how did you prepare, and how did you support these internal change agents?
Now, the lowest point of that story is where we realized we had local excellence, but the overall flow was not any better, right? And we had already had interlock with other parts of the organization. So we had some semblance of people whose lives would be a little better if we were working a little differently. Now, it was in their interest, Vasco, that things changed. So it was easy for me to identify those people immediately because we could answer the question, what's in it for me? So those were the top of the backlog candidates that I wanted to speak to see if they were interested in change, A, and they were interested in being part of the changing the whole organization. Now, obviously, the difficult bit that we had to overcome, Vasco, was, but I have a day job. I don't have time to go and change.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Right, and this was difficult because it's true, right? They have a day job, and over time, my message was, listen, now think about your day job. Think about the time you're spending in your day. Now look at your calendar and where you're spending your time. Look at how many meetings you have that you only need because of how you have structured your work. Now think about not having those meetings and having the gift of time if you did things a little differently. Now, obviously, I was that guy who was stood with a round wheel when people were busy pulling a cart with square wheels. They were just telling me, we are too busy, go away. But over time, right, chip by chip by chip, we were patient. They began to see that there's a point. There is a point to what we're saying. It was long, it was hard, it was not trivial to find those change agents. But the minute we convinced those few interlock people, they were converts. We didn't have to. They were acting like we would in the interest of change because they began to see the benefits they would have. Now, Vasco, you asked, how did we do it? Now, it was not a click of your fingers and it happened. It took months to sort of chip away at their interests and get them on board with their change. Now, this is the point where you spoke about the trust. Now, the minute they change, people listen to them because they're not a preachy consultant.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was the tip of the iceberg, the tipping point, so to speak, Vasco.
And perhaps one great tip from that story is start working on that right away from day one, right? Finding the internal people who might be change agents in the future.
Exactly right. The earlier you start, the better, because believe it or not, the people you think will be interested in change, they are probably not that interested. So you'll have a bit of a trial and error, a few misses. You have a few hit and misses, and you have to be baking that into your plan to have a few errors.
Absolutely. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Ravi.
Thanks for having me, Vasco.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role, we'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.